Ooh. Okay, I could literally play that, like, pretty much, like, let's not talk anymore. Like, I'm just gonna watch the House of the Gypsies. But hello everyone. Welcome to my show of one, I guess. No, it's my show of two. Every Wednesday at 2 p.m. PST, I come onto LinkedIn Live and Happily YouTube Live to have a conversation with a friend and a colleague who has, I think it's just like, we just talk about something that's like really interesting or insightful about what's happening within our wonderfully crazy world today. And in case you didn't know, I'm Sarah Shuey, and I'm the founder of Happily, which is the largest and most diverse network of freelance and independent event producers. And today I'm very excited to have a conversation with my friend, Hedda Leonardi. Hedda is like, when, I don't know, like I always kind of hear like, ooh, gypsy woman, like whatever, like I hear her name. She has had many lives, and she also enjoys, as she says, living many lives simultaneously, which is awesome. She was a journalist. She's been a business partner to some of the world's biggest brands, truly. Gourmet Whole Foods chef, a business partner to Pamela Anderson, certified kundalini yoga teacher, has worked on special projects for National Geographic, the owner of LA's first and I think only vegan hotel, the Treehouse in Bel Air, and she's a partner of the Gypsy Code. And I believe actually like her husband was the drummer of that band. And so Hedda, come up, say hi.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me on. Really delighted and excited to be here.
Oh my gosh, I'm really excited. So I mentioned many things, but mostly, I guess like recently, I guess you've been working with some of the big projects that I know that you've been about, and kind of how we first initially got connected was in the work that you're doing with the House of the Gypsies, as well as now, like, I'm learning a lot more about the latest stuff with the Gypsy Code. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
So, you know, you mentioned that my husband was somehow involved in all of that stuff. And so when I married him, he was the drummer of the Gypsy Kings at the time.
Ooh.
And left.
Casual.
And left to come to Los Angeles and, you know, get married and all of those things. And I was really excited about having this in my circle, you know, and from a little girl in Australia, it's shameful to say. I mean, there's many things about life which nobody's willing to admit anymore. But I do remember Cher's song, Gypsies, Tramps and Seeds, which I used to love. And I used to pretend that I was a gypsy and that I'd been born into absolutely the wrong household in Australia. And I loved the rebellious freedom of that song. Of course, it's got absolutely nothing to do with gypsies. And, you know, it's taken 8 years to really decode that. But when we created House of the Gypsies, which, you know, was taking the security of home, as in a house, and the longing for freedom, which I feel we are all seeking more than ever to redefine that and reiterate that in our lives. When we created that, we created a strong philanthropic link that went with that, which, I mean, I don't want to preempt our conversation, but really for the last 8 years, I have been in an immersion and a fast track ass beating in relation to the Gypsies and coming up to speed on the culture and the why they've existed for 1,500 years and remained pretty much intact, as we discovered when we took them back to Rajasthan, which is the birthplace of all Gypsy culture. So
yeah, I mean, like I think that most people definitely don't know about Gypsy culture. I think that, and I also think that, like, at least for me, like most of my like girlfriends are also in that same vein where it's like we're Gypsies, right? So, but I will say that for me, when I was like 22, maybe, I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but I actually had the pleasure of visiting a Gypsy camp. I was living in Barcelona, and a girlfriend of mine like kind of caught the eye of this very cute like Gypsy man, and he invited her to his camp, and she was like, will you come with me? I'm gonna go hang out with Gitanos. And I was like, what? Are you serious? And we went, and we drove out like in Catalonia, and it was a camp where there are all these teepees and didgeridoos. You could hear them from miles away, like playing. And when we got there, it was amazing, where it was like there's this music and there was this like sort of nomadic experience, and they had this old, Catalonian house that they like some of them, the residents, I guess, were there. And on the second floor was the most state-of-the-art video production equipment I'd ever seen. And I was like, wow, like Gypsies are really like, it's more than I ever thought, like ever imagined, way cooler. But so I've always had this since then, like a love of Gypsies, and the Gypsy people I met were beautiful and amazing. But I think that overall, it's probably fair to say that Gypsies are romanticized and kind of sensationalized within mass media, right? So
I would definitely say so. I mean, it's interesting you talk about Barcelona. The Gypsies, I like to see them, or I don't like to see them as this, but they really are the original refugees, because they left at the time of the Mughal invasion in India. They were wealthy. They had left on horseback. And at that time in history, the royals were trained by the Brahmin to have siddhi powers, so special powers, so they could, see the future. They understood the movement of the planets, all kinds of things that were taught at that time. We may get onto education in this conversation. That's a whole other ball of wax. But they moved through, they left on horseback from Rajasthan in India, northern India, and they ended up in Europe. So you can imagine, I mean, it's quite a trip, but they ended up in Europe at the gates of, Paris in the 1400s. So there's a lot more information on them, is tracked from about 1100s onwards. But, for example, they arrived at the gates of Paris with a letter from one of the kings at the time asking them to give these people safe passage. And Gypt comes from Egyptian because they were dark-skinned and people thought they were Gypsum. And so there's been, I don't know the complete etymology of the word. But people don't know that. Yeah, people don't know about Gypsies. They are romanticized. They are an example of a culture that has remained intact for 1,500 years. When we took the grandchildren of the Gypsy Kings founders, and that's what the project is actually, second generation. Is it second or third generation? So there was, the grandchildren of, so they're, the average age of those musicians, and my husband is one of the oldest, but the average age is 29. So they, they get married very early and they look older. And so when you find out they're 29 and 30, you go, wow. But when we took them back, they were shocked because they could see their relatives. They went, oh, that looks like, they all give each other nicknames, and the Indians do as well. So the Rajasthani boys did. And they found that the old Kalo language is based on an ancient Indian language. And so they were able to communicate to each other as well. So it was really like, oh, my God, it was anecdotal that we came from India. Wow, it's really true. And then somebody in Hyderabad did a study and traced the genealogy and confirmed, what had been anecdotal. And, there's 157 tribes around the world. They're in Brazil. Obviously, when people think of the Gypsies, they think often of the Romanis. and Romania. And they think of stereotyping, you know, around thievery and whatever. And it's like all aspects of society. There's small pockets of all kinds everywhere. But one of the reasons why they've managed to stay intact and adaptive, so, you know, our Rajasthani boys, they're Muslim, our south of France Gypsies are evangelical Christians, but no one, you know, the unifying field is the music, and what's kept them intact is their adaptability, but also the closed nature of them. So you experienced welcome, and you always do. I mean, they love nothing more. I mean, Sarah, I'm sure, like, you had this private concert and you couldn't believe it, you know, because we're paying hundreds of dollars to see our favorite musicians, and then here we go to these intimate settings. And I have to share a story which just put it all in perspective for me. And you're having this incredible concert and your heart is so full and you feel so much richer for it. And it's because they're playing, you know, in the keys of the heart chakra. And it's not like they're even talking about this stuff. I mean, like, you know, like we had a conversation backstage beforehand, and I've gone very deep with the medicine of music and how gypsy culture and how gypsy music fits into that. They're not thinking like that. They're not going, oh, we have to strategically create a situation where the audience and us, we can, you know, join together.
Strategy voice. It's hilarious.
Well, you know, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And let me tell you, no one knows what they're doing at the moment anymore. And so the revolution has really arrived. Like, we are this is on fire. The Gypsies, it's like you ask them, how are you handling COVID-19? There's nothing's changed for them because they're not, or maybe now they go, oh, I'd like to have my own recording studio or something, which they didn't before because they were always out playing. But there's so much to this, you know, and it's very, 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 very deep. And, you know, these boys, the story I wanted to tell was we were in India. It was like, I think, one of the third or fourth visits to India to bring these tribes together, because they're also like, oh, you're the same as me, but you're different, and you eat lentils. No, you eat Caesar salad. Wow, this is how do we do this, and how do we bring the music together? And we were in Goa, and we were being paid a fortune by a friend of ours who's a hotel owner down in Goa. I'm just trying to think what his name is. The hotel's the Sofuller, I think, to give him a bit of a plug. And they played for 2 hours, got paid a fortune, etc. Then it was a Thursday night, and normally on a Thursday night, the owner is a huge Gypsy Kings fan, and so he every Thursday night he had a Gypsy Kings cover band playing in the lounge. Well, this day the Gypsy Kings cover band got sidelined for House of the Gypsies, you know, with all the original music, because they all know that music. That music, by the way, is not unique to the Gypsy Kings. It's the music of the Gypsies of the south of France that has been produced and, one might say, appropriated, but these chords are the chords of the people. But anyway, they after, when they discovered that the Gypsy Kings band was playing the sort of like the after hours thing, the boys went in and played for another 3 hours with them, and the guys were like completely gobsmacked, because here these guys, like, they've been playing their music, and here these guys came in, and they just want to play, and they just want you to be a part of it, and they want you to sing along no matter what your voice is, and they, you know, and so there is no sort of separation between those two. So I'm glad you had that experience of it, because that's what's filled my heart, you know, so much, and kept me going in some really odd and extremely tenuous moments. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, after going and living there, I mean, I still very clearly, like, you know, when you have such a an experience that just marks you, you know, like that day, like, is I can see the stove, and I can smell the bread, and I can it's stupid, but I could see the editing bay, like, and like just remember that feeling of like, everything I thought I knew about Gypsies was so wrong. I'm curious because, but actually when you described to me is like, yeah, the feeling of acceptance was the feeling of like simultaneously like acceptance, but also very much like that there was this closed community, and it felt like there was this air of kind of like security or protection, and almost for me, I thought that the music was this was actually like a form of protection. That's how I interpreted the experience.
Well, that's really interesting. I mean, music is medicine at its deepest form. And if you want to talk about protection in its deepest iteration, you want to go there, they are playing in the key of the heart chakra. Most of their, or a lot of their music is. And so the ultimate form of protection is to open your heart with love. And so, it's music came out of the caves of India. I mean, I'm glad my husband's not in the room because I think he would throw up. But I beat the drum of this. Music is medicine. It came out of the caves of India to heal us. There are, each of our organs carries a key. Our spine is a 2.5 octaves, and we have to complete the final octave with the calibration, the vertebrae being calibrated to patience, unconditional love, non-judgment, compassion, and so there's so much to it, right? There's so much to it. The bottom line is I could go off on so many different tangents of it, but the bottom line is that music is by the people, of the people, and for the people. And when all of the stuff that we've gone through in this revolution that we're going through now is done, what will be remembered is the music. What will be remembered is the arts. And so they come from these lineage, this cultural lineage, which they've kept alive. So we're kind of getting to see what people were like 1,500 years ago now. But like some people say, oh, the Buddha would be using technology. Damn right. And these people, like they will, they enjoy the benefits of what this technology revolution has to offer, or, you'll see them driving around in flash cars or whatever it is that inspires them in that moment, but they're not attached to it. So they can live with or without it, because they've been outsiders anyway. And then the other piece to that is so it's like any group of people that you go into, you're like, hi, my name's Hedda, or my name's Sarah, and then there's codes. There's all these codes that people have, and like 4, 5, 10 years later, you go, oh my god, I had no idea when I walked into that situation.
That's the story of my life.
What was really going on, And, things are becoming more transparent. Vulnerability, sexy. Like there's a lot of things going on now where people are opening up in a different way. But, the story that I was sharing with you about education really gave me pause to reflect because, as part of my enthusiasm, my deep, great enthusiasm for love and music, for love and music and for the love of music and for this wonderful cultural exploration, having been, studying yoga. I shouldn't say how long I've been studying yoga for because it makes me seem like it's like, God, she still doesn't have her shit together. But it's true. It's like, oh, well, haven't you
yoga though? Is to have that humility.
well, it's like, why aren't you levitating? You've been doing this for 40 years. But my love for India, I didn't travel to India until I traveled to the villages of Rajasthan with the Gypsies. So it was a very different kind of awakening that I had. But I was going, okay, we're going to educate the girls and we're going to preserve the culture. And, this was sort of 2012. And as I said to you, it was, I had a big sort of slap on the ass because these things that are, where you're shifting whatever degree it's going to be, and probably we won't know until after us are all dead. But, when you're working inside of these things, they take a lot longer than you think they're going to take. They're much more complex than you think that they're going to be. And I had a huge and somewhat embarrassing awakening, I would say, when we ahead of launching this project, which it's launching this year, in terms of House of the Gypsies, and we're launching it for social impact. But we've joined forces with Princess Dia Kumari of Jaipur. And so we launched the collaboration at the City Palace in Rajasthan. Now, if you know anything about Gypsy culture in India, the kings and queens are the patrons of the musicians. And so there is a very strong reverence and link between the two. They're inseparable. And so launching it in that setting was a source of great joy for the Manganya tribe and the Langa tribe that we work with. But we were before the concert. We were with Princess Dia Kumari, and we were taking pictures, and we were talking about girls making money and education, and there was a lot of chit chat in Mawari, which is the language that's spoken up there. And I was like, "What's going on?" And she said, "Well, we're having an argument about the girls being educated." And I said, "Oh, well, do you want the girls educated?" And these two gypsy tribes from the south of France and Rajasthan, I've never asked them. They've got 17 girls between them, 17 daughters. I've never asked them, "Do you want your girls educated?" And they said, "Absolutely not." And I was like, because this has been a centerpiece, from my perspective.
Yeah.
And
so what is the role of women in Gypsy culture?
Well, the point was, and it's families are fragile, life is fragile, cultures are fragile, and so they depend on the women to hold the culture together. There's such, obviously this is complex. This is a very complex subject, and it's very, very deep. So to generalize isn't really doing great service to it. But I have to say that, not everybody, in these cultures is wanting their kids married off at the age of 11, it's not like that. It's in that sense, in that, oh my goodness, they were used to doing things very differently 1,500 years ago. Good, bad, or indifferent, that's a whole other subject. But basically, the women are the centre of the family. And so they've observed that there is a factory education, which is creating people that are not going to be useful and then giving people aspirations. That's fine. But to go off into the city and then live in poverty in the city. So, what we're finding, and I was heartened because, so it's about, they're not going to send their girls in uniform to go out of the home when they're part of the infrastructure of keeping the home together. That's the first thing, right? And really the most important of all, as far as I can see. The second thing is they are observant. Some of the reason why they've stayed together is because they haven't succumbed to an education system which Manish Jain, who is a part of an organisation called the Localisation. He was part of a World Localisation forum that was held over the weekend. He calls it factory education. Sort of, what are you being educated for and why? And one of his things is like, I was educated at the feet of my grandmother. Like, we have to go back to getting our education and or for education to be seen as a hands-on, on the ground, practical interaction with the forces that we're dealing with in our lives that are going to be beneficial to us inside of our lives and to create the resilience and the self-responsibility. So, this is, so my niche was like, I was like, oh, wow, yes, that gives me a bit more of a framework or some language, because it's not, it's that typical thing where we come in as this first world to okay, I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to show you the way. I'm going to put in this, that, and the other. And we don't ask them what they need or what it is that's important. We don't consider the infrastructure of, I was involved in sitting in and being the only woman in one of their council meetings because we had a simple situation. We had we have 4 Rajasthani musicians. We have 4 sort of Gypsy Kings people, both family and previous band members who are not family members. And, we were doing a show. I think we were doing something for Jazz Alley. It was when we were starting out also in America, and I knew nothing about the music business here. And so, there was like, okay, we can't afford to bring everybody, and it was like, well, wow, where is music's place in this if you can't afford to bring people, right? But what that did was it set off this huge issue there, because these guys are, there's all of these guys are part of this group, so they all expect to travel, when we perform. Well, of course. So me saying, if you're all going to come, there's going to be less money because we're performing in night venues, we're not performing on a main stage of a yada yada or a, you know, performing arts where there's a different relationship with music. And, you know, we're performing in, you know, these jazz clubs, you know, and these are all about just cranking out the money. They're music lovers who run them, but there's a whole sort of algorithm and industry around it, which is enslavement, even for the musicians. What happened was, then they were like, Mansoor, who leads the group, the Gypsy component in Rajasthan, got a hammering. Like, you've taken the money. I mean, it was a fight that lasted for a year. And I had to go there and I had to explain that it wasn't Mansoor, that the decision was made for these reasons. And after they listened to me as the only woman, which was, you know, I mean, it was shocking to be in that situation. But they went, right, okay, we understand, it's settled now, all or none. You know, so they didn't, you know, and I was like, well, it's true. Like, it's not like, you know, it is all or none. And that's what we're dealing with at the moment. We're dealing with everybody gets treated the same, right? Everybody gets the same rights and opportunities, or nobody does. But we don't. We that inconvenient truth of someone's going to get more privilege than the other. Someone's going to be able to travel first class while the rest of the people have to, but they've earned it. But no, we stand on the shoulders of each other all the time. And so this creation of this elitism, this, you know, whether it's a class system, which is what India's dealing with, or whether it be, you know, a musical hierarchy, you know, that means that this person gets treated like that and that person doesn't, you know, and that's why TikTok exists. That's why, you know, that's why, you know, the voice is taken off. It's because everybody wants a piece of it, you know. This is a great book about Kenyan politics, My Turn to Eat. So eventually, you know, and when you start looking at it, you go, yeah, you know, it's like, who said? And so the Gypsy Code, so the arse whipping was born out of the thinking that we were going to, you know, save them by having girls' education. Well, you know, the girls do have a right to be educated, of course, but in village. So let's bring the schools to them so they can study in, you know, in the times that suit them, and let's make sure that the subject matter is relevant. So we've joined forces with Princess Dia Kamari, and we've joined forces with ecal.org to do that. And so it's like people who know better because they're from there and they can navigate that in a much more productive way. And then we also we've also got the cultural preservation bit, which is really interesting and important. But the other thing that came out of it is the Gypsy Code, because I was, I'm laughing all the time. You know, you highlighted it, and I'm in the same boat as you. It's like, oh, I'm a gypsy. No, you're not. You know, no, you're not. You know, and I was thinking about Jason Momoa, who has Pride of Gypsies, and I was thinking about, you know, Jessica Alba. I know it was Jessica Biel. She was quoted saying, "Oh, we're just a wild bunch of gypsies." No, you're not. You know, gypsies got slaughtered during World War II along with the Jews. There's actually monuments in Germany to acknowledge that now. And you know, I believe that, you know, there's more and more prominence being given to the story of what happened to the gypsies. There's a piece of it which is, we'll enjoy your music and, you know, we'll have you around to dinner, but you're not going to marry not going to marry into the family, right? You know, so there's, you know, all of those inequalities that exist inside of that. There are 157 tribes, so it's sort of like you with a you know, waving of the hand, going gypsies. Well, you know, the Romani tribe is one group, you know, but there's 5 tribes in Brazil who are very different from the tribes in Albania, who are different from the, you know, Romanian gypsies, who are different from the Nawa in Morocco. So they're all distinctly different. And there needs to be some deeper exploration and sensitivity given to that, not just a great news story for a moment or an angle in a thing. I mean, probably the thing that makes me laugh the most, and I never did get to Burning Man, so all the burners out there will be like, you know, but you know, it's like that, people think about themselves in that nomadic sense when they go there. Well, for me, it's an arts festival that exemplifies a space in time. It's got nothing to do with nomadic culture. It's got nothing to do with gypsies, and so, even, even the gypsy stores and, just this sort of you see people running around.
The stain on your face is like pretty funny. So
I don't mean to. I'm not.
No, I mean, I think it's fun. Of course, like when I think that when you contextualize and when people do have a better understanding of like how hard really like gypsies have worked to preserve their culture against all odds. They deserve the right to be able to proudly call themselves gypsies. No,
yeah, and for it to be, for it to become a true story rather than a fairy tale. I think, right. Most importantly, that's really how I see it. And we've had some great support. I mean, there are people who are, who understand the need for cultural preservation at a very deep and authentic level. So it's, it's happening and it's coming. And really, it's like everything, like what's going on at the moment. You have to stumble and fall occasionally. You have to make mistakes, and this rebirth into a more aware and enlightened and perhaps joyful, if we can be, version of ourselves. It's sort of a painful process. So yeah, I get it, and I don't. It's not about, for me. I'm really disdain. It's just so,
that was my take on it, but
really, it's more about we had Gina Murdoch, who leads an organisation called Lead with Love, out of Aspen, and we had a launch of the Gypsy Code at. It was sort of a proof of concept, really, because the need for the performer and the audience to become one integrous macrocosm is really, really important, and going to be more and more important in these times. And as much as I was having a conversation with somebody the other day about large scale concerts, and it's just different. It's a different energy. It's a different dynamic. There's a different financial. Everything's different about it. From your experience of being in that smaller situation, how it opened your heart and how it just became the experience, one of the quintessential experiences that you'll take to your deathbed with you. And really, we all deserve, or we all have to know that we deserve the right to release the music that's inside of us. I mean, Plato was the one who said that most of us die with our music still inside of us, because we're told from a very early age, certainly in this culture, well, don't give up your day job, or stay in the shower with that. And so I don't even know in schools if music, is really, it's the first subject that gets scrapped kind of thing, and yet it's the most important thing. It's the thing that will drive us deeper into ourselves. And so really, that's, for me, the Gypsy Code is really about reconnecting with that. And when we launched, and we've been able to do this a couple of times now, what we did is it was sort of inside of a corporate training, right? So people were, there was a lot of talking heads and lectures, and it was all well and good, and we were sort of the light relief. So we were the ones who were coming and showing them how to do like the gypsy dance. They got to see how to dance this dance, and they got to do use their hands, because the gypsies are like, if you say to them, oh no, I can't sing, or does it, they're like, well, you've got a tongue, and you've got a voice, and you've got hands, and you've got feet. What are you talking about? We're like, what are you talking about? And so in this expression of this, is this sort of code, is the sort of all are welcome. And so people were learning to clap, they learnt to sing, they learnt to the sort of polyrhythms, they learned all kinds of things. And then the House of the Gypsies were performing actually at Bel Air up in Aspen on the last night. And so people were like, oh, great, now we're going to see these guys perform. But what it was a unified celebration. And when my husband called the dancers up, he said, where are my dancers? And they suddenly realised that they were inside of this performance. I mean, it was just like the party was like it took off.
Oh, fun. Yeah.
And it stayed at that level because they were involved in, 4 or 5 points along the way, but then were also given permission to clap and be silly and all of those things throughout. And so it ended on this high note, which I've seen over and over and over again. And so I see the liberation that music can bring. And I see from the research I've done the enslavement. We were talking earlier about, which I feel very passionately about, is that there are keys of sadness and there are keys of joy, and it just is. Just is. Even if you don't believe it, doesn't mean it isn't true. There just are, and there are beats of enslavement and there are beats of joy. And, so I think right now in these times, if your mantra, if you're singing a Demi Lovato song and it's I'm a train wreck, I'm a train wreck, and I'm a train wreck, how can you get out of that? That's mantra. The Indians would say that's mantra. I had a girlfriend who's studying with Stevie Mackay, who is J-Lo's, one of J-Lo's singing teachers. And what they're having to do is pick a song every day to mimic. She said, I never saw so much codependence and stories of conditional love in songs that I'm trying to learn to sing. So we have to start paying attention to what we're listening to. And I would go as far, and I know it's a radical comment to make, but I would go as far as to say that some of the suicide that's happening is the tone and the beat and the words that people are listening to over and over and over and over again. Because music is medicine. 1918, this, Oxford, music, I'm looking at music and health, and they calibrated all of those. And then they went back to ancient Roman times where where the prescription for somebody who was suffering from gout was to play the flute, so.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think that, again, like as you said something earlier about how the music is really the artifact or the expression of a community, and so it makes a lot of sense to me that and songs are written by people. We have songwriters, that come and every Thursday we do like a happily hour, and we have a live music performance, and we get to meet the artist. And you see that it is like a mantra. You work on a song and you craft it and you sing it over and over, and there's the hook, right? And when you're singing someone else's song, you're really singing someone else's life and someone else's culture. So it makes a lot of sense that we should be. I think your message of being more intentional about the cultures and the community and the people and the songs that you put inside of your mind and body, the vibrations of all of that is very, very important. So
I think we can liberate ourselves through music. One of the great examples that I like to use for people who know, because not too many of the great Indian musicians have crossed over into America, and it's not because of a lack of desire from a community, but just the control that's being exercised over what people listen to. I mean, it's as straightforward as that. And as good a job as Spotify may be doing, they're still not going deep enough. I mean, there's still somebody curating your life for you through these things, and it's really, it's very, that's a very deep and separate conversation. But there's a performer, Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, and he was championed. There's a gentleman by the name of Babaji, who's this wild character who's still around, but he championed, he was a promoter in America, an Indian promoter in America, who championed and who happened to know, the head of William Morris Endeavour's music division. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. And so Nusrat started to get heard, and people went crazy with him. And what he was like, he didn't have a set list. He could sometimes be 2 or 3 hours late. When he would start, he could play for 6 hours, and he would read the feeling. And that's what these great musicians do, both classically, which he was, and also the folk musicians, like our Gypsy musicians who are folk musicians. They read the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're not just going to perform their 10 songs in this sort of do-me culture kind of way. They're connecting with people in a different way.
Mm.
And so I'm thinking about, when we first saw the Italians on lockdown and playing on balconies, how much joy, it brings. And how much the truth of that, and not trying to monetize it or create some kind of a whatever, but just for the sheer joy. And so, I see these incredible musicians all the time in a system where they've become these worker bees when they're actually potential liberators of our souls. So it's, it's again, very, very deep conversation here, but very important to, reconsider. I mean, who knew that Live Nation would ever tumble into a need where they needed to get, to be bailed out, right? Who knew that? I mean, it's just, unbelievable. But I feel that everything we have to recalibrate around everything. And so I feel like the hour of the Gypsies and the House of the Gypsies is now, because it is that music of joy. A lot has been considered. There is a deep social impact message that's going along with that. We've got, Red One, who's a fabulous producer who produced all of Lady Gaga and J-Lo stuff. He's producing the first single, and it will be for girls' education, but not in the way that we thought it was going to be, and on it goes. And, for the it's almost like, I didn't really understand fully Live Aid back in the day, but the Freddie Mercury movie and the impact that had at that time. And my girlfriend, Jeannie Fester, she's done rock and roll movies, and she's done one on The Who. And if anybody gets the chance to see it, you get to see the sort of the devotion that people have to the music, because it was honest, it was just honest. And it wasn't during a time when people were like, oh, well, what are your social media figures? It's like, oh, no, this is fucking great. We'll make something of it because we can. I laugh, because I'm thinking like, wow, well, when Led Zeppelin and The Who walked into an office, there wasn't somebody saying to them, well, you have to prove that you've got these numbers before we'll let you get through, into the hallowed halls of having whatever,
right,
and whatever. And I'm enjoying seeing some of that returning.
Right. Yeah. I have to say, it's like a common theme in the conversations that I'm having in personal and professional lives of very innovative, creative, established people saying, like, we need to dismantle the system and restructure it so that it works, for the people. So I'm hearing a lot of that today too, which is great. Hedda, our time is up, and I'm going to close us out by saying goodbye to you. And then I think I'm just going to play the rest of the video that we started playing. It seems like the most perfect way to end, if that's all right with you.
In the end, all we have left is music. So it's perfect. Whatever I said, scratched completely. And enjoy the music. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for giving me the chance to talk about these things that I feel passionate about too. I'm really grateful for that.
Oh my gosh, it's such a joy and an honor. Everyone, please go find Hedda on LinkedIn. She's such a lovely, open person, and as you can tell, you can talk to her about everything and anything with so much, I don't know, just so much curiosity and wonder. So thank you. Thank you.
My heart is open wide.
Yes, definitely. Yes. And with that, I'm going to play this video. I'll see you all again next week. We'll have another conversation with a friend, and be well and be happy.